Hi class, we're going to get started on a little informational video in regards to Lab 6.1 for Chapter 6. If you'll notice that in Module 10 for Chapter 6, you have been given a couple of different files. For the Lab 6.1, you're given a data dictionary, so it gives you an outline, or it tells you what each of the variables mean, such as this column D. I'm sure you can figure C and D, city, state, hospital name. You'll need to know what all rule means. It's a coded variable, so you'll see zeros and ones, maybe, I believe. Yeah, zeros and ones for that variable. And then you have another coded variable, ownership. And your data dictionary explains to you what that ownership code means. And then in column G, you have the label of teaching, and that data dictionary explains to you what that teaching method is at that facility. Then we have our number of beds at our facilities, and then we have some operating information. We have operating expenses, operating revenue, operating income, and operating margin. So those are actually real numbers, so those aren't coded variables, so that information is represented as real numbers. This is a very large data set. So that's kind of why I'm going through it this week. You have, like I said, your data set and then your lab instructions. And then right underneath that you have a file, and it's called Lab 6.1 Outputs. It is a Word document, and basically what it is it's help for you as you go about answering questions 1 through 7 on your assignment sheet. The only section of the assignment is question number 2, create appropriate descriptive statistics for certain variables. I have outlined in the Lab 6.1 Outputs document specifically what columns I want you to do that descriptive statistics output. So that's kind of where we're going to start right now. And we're going to start with H, and that's the one that I've given as an example for you. You will need to take that output and copy and paste it into your Word document. If you submit it to me in an Excel file, I'm probably just going to give you a 0 for the assignment and send you an email and let you know that you need to submit it as a Word document. I don't want the whole Excel file. I only want you to copy and paste out your descriptive statistics outputs. So for this one, like I said, we're going to jump on to number 2. Number 1, you're going to identify each variable type as nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio. You should be able to identify these by using the variable scale decision tree table. It's in chapter 1 of your textbook. I don't have the exact page number, but we've done that already a couple of times. Use that decision tree to help make those decisions. Question number 2, you are going to use the data analysis tool pack to complete the descriptive statistics for the variables in columns H, I, J, K, and L. So H through L, you should complete a descriptive statistics output, and we're going to click Data, Data Analysis, and it's going to give us all of our options in our data analysis tool pack. We want descriptive statistics, and it's going to ask us our input range. We're going to start out with number of beds, and we're going to have to copy all or highlight all the way down through the data set. Like I said, it's a large data set. Oops. Okay. And we do have our labels in our first row, so we're going to click that. We want it to output, we're going to say in a new worksheet. And remember, we want all of our summary statistics, confidence level for the mean, our largest and our smallest. And we're going to click OK. And that gives us our output. And you should get the same output that is listed in your output sheet. And then what you'll need to do is copy and paste this output and put it into a Word document. Okay, so you'll need to do that exact same thing for H, I, J, K, and L. So the reason why we're doing that is we kind of want to take a look at the data that's in our data set. And remember, by doing that descriptive statistics output, it gives us the average, it gives us our median and our mode, it gives us our standard deviation, it gives us our smallest number, it gives us our largest number, and the total number of entries in our data set. That's useful information if we were wanting to calculate a t-statistic to make a comparison to something. Those are things to remember. If you're, as you're looking at your final project specifically, it will help you a lot to understand that if you do that descriptive statistics output on the variable of interest, it's going to automatically populate those things that you would need to know. So again, for number 2, you are going to need to do an output, a descriptive statistics output for number of beds, operating expense, operating revenue, operating income, and operating margin. Something I want to take a look at real quick here as we're looking through our data set and understanding the data that it's in. If you'll notice, column K, a lot of the information that's in here is in parentheses. I'm not sure that you all understand what that means. So when the operating income is in parentheses, that means that its expenses were greater than the revenue. And if you look, you can see that's the truth. That's reality. Okay. So if we look through here, we notice that there's a lot of facilities that have a negative operating income. Okay, and so we're going to move right along to number 3. And the question for number 3 is, are urban hospitals more or less profitable than rural hospitals? So this is, here we're kind of doing the same thing as what we did on our last lab, our lab 5.1. We are sorting the data, separating the data into, remember, we're looking at rural, right? Which, are they equal? Are their profits equal? And that would be our null hypothesis. Our null our null hypothesis would be that urban hospitals' profitability is equal to that of rural hospitals' profitability. Our alternative hypothesis is that they're not equal. So for this one, we would, in order to answer this question, we would need to sort the data for all rule. So in our column here, we want to sort and filter this, and we want to sort and filter at A to Z. So that what that's going to do is bring all of our smallest variables first, and then go up from there. And we know our variables from looking at our data dictionary would be zeros or ones. So what this does is it sorts all that information out for us. So if we're looking at profitability, our instructions tell us that operating margin is the best indicator for profitability. So what we're going to do here, and I have provided you the output, so since this is such a large data set and it's hard to get all that information together in your data analysis tool pack, but I'm going to show you how we would do that. I have to shrink this small enough so everybody can see it. We are going to data. We are going to data analysis tool pack. Remember, we're doing a t-test 2 sample assuming equal variances. I've already done our f-test, I think. So we're just going to go with assuming equal variances. And remember, our instructions tell us that operating margin is an indicator of profitability. We're not going to start with our heading, our label in the first row. We're going to start at our first set of data. And what we're watching here is our, on the left-hand side of the screen, we're watching our rural and our urban and rural populations. And we're going to go all the way down and include all the data that includes zeros. Oh, way too far. This is where it gets kind of tricky because you're watching 2 separate columns. Okay, right there goes in our first. Okay, so we need to start for our variable 2 in 2026. And then we need to go through the rest of our data. Let's see if I can get this right. And again, I'm not asking you to create this output just because there's kind of a lot of information. And we are going to go ahead and output the range right here. You can use what I give you. That's on the second page. We're going to click OK. And you need to open it up so you can read the information that's in the output. Okay, so just like we did on last week's lab, we are comparing our t-statistic to our t-critical two-tail value. So what you're going to need to do is tell me if they have the same profitability or if they have significantly different profitability. You're going to do that by comparing your t-statistic to the critical value. Again, you need to know what the zeros and ones are for. You're looking that information up in the data dictionary that's provided. You're comparing the t-statistic to the critical value. Again, like we've said in previous, you're rejecting that null hypothesis, stating that there would be equal, or you would not reject the null hypothesis. You have to base your conclusion on the information that I've provided to you in this output. is that t-statistic outside that critical value range. Okay, so we're going to move right along to questions 4 and 5. Question 4, we're looking at the different types of ownerships of hospitals and their level of profitability. Remember, profitability is identified by that operating margin. And if so, which is more profitable? So here, the easiest way to find this out is to create a pivot table. And I'm going to show you how to do that, but I am not going to require you to do this. Insert pivot table. And I'm going to have to highlight all the data in my, let's see, here we go, whoops. A lot of data. You need to be familiar with how to do pivot tables. This is something you're going to be required to do. Well, I don't think that worked. Let's try again. Okay, I guess it was working right the other time. So here, for the specific one, we're looking at ownership type. And we know that the data dictionary will tell you what that ownership 1, 2, and 3 mean. And remember, we're looking at operating margin because that tells us about profitability. And what it automatically does is count that information. That doesn't really tell us what we want to know, so we have to change that value to an average. So this should look just like the output you have in your Lab 6.1 outputs. You're going to tell me which ownership type, if they have different levels of profitability, and if so, which type is most profitable. And then we are going to do the same thing. We are going to get rid of ownership. And we're going to look separated out by teaching. And again, this should be identical to the output that you have in the output sheet. You're going to tell me what those variables, major, minor, and none mean. If they have the same profitability, if they have different levels of profitability, and which type is most profitable. Okay, and the last thing we're doing, let's see if I can get it to make some, we are looking at correlations. Again, I am not requiring you to do a correlation because I provided the output for you, but I'm just going to show you how you would do a correlation output, and then we're going to talk a little bit about how you read it, how you would read that output. Okay, we are going to go to Data Analysis Tool Pack. We need to find correlation. Okay, and it's going to ask us what we want to see correlations on. We want to see correlations on number of beds and our operating variables, I think. Okay, so we're going to include the headings, or the labels, and we're going to include all of the data in those H, I, J, K, and L columns. And we do have our labels in the first row. That's going to make it a lot easier to read. Ask us where we want our output range. And we're going to say right here. And then we're going to click OK. I've only provided you part of the output range because that's the part you need to answer the questions, which is this part right here. So the first question that it asks number 6, which of the operating data values is most correlated with the number of beds? So correlation, you're looking for a positive correlation or a negative correlation. A positive correlation is as number of beds increase, that operating margin increases. That's a positive correlation. As one increases, the other one increases. A negative correlation would be as one increases, the other one decreases. So what's most correlated, what has the highest correlation? So as number of beds is going up, what's closest to 1? You would look at this information and tell us what's closest to 1. Number of beds is at 1. What is the next variable that comes next closest to 1? And then the last question, number 7, is the number of beds a good predictor of operating margin or operating revenue? So again, as number of beds increases, does operating margin increase or does operating revenue increase more? Which increases more? Those are going to be the answers to those two questions. And you're just looking at that, what I have output there. If you have any questions with this week's lab, be sure to let me know. I know I'm getting it to you a little later in the week than I'd like. If you have any questions over the weekend, make sure to send me an email. I will try to check my email as often as I possibly can, but you might have to give me some time to get back to you. As always, if you have any questions, be sure to let me know.